asking about her business interests, completely unrelated to the matter at hand. The chairman tried to steer it back gently. He tapped his microphone. Just trying to maintain order, you see. But the congresswoman waved him off. A dismissive flick of the wrist. Like swatting a fly. She leaned into her mic again, voice dripping with faux concern. I'm just curious, Mr. Chairman. It seems relevant to understanding her perspective. Jasmine Crockett just watched. Didn't fidget. Didn't interrupt. Her eyes, though, fixed on the congresswoman. Not angry. Just focused. Like a lens adjusting. The room was starting to feel tight. You could hear someone shuffle papers nervously. A low murmur rippled through the gallery seats behind them. The congresswoman pressed on, enjoying the attention. Perhaps the gentle lady from Texas could enlighten us. She smiled wide and saccharine. A smile that didn't reach her eyes. Crockett took a slow breath. You could barely see her chest rise and fall. She waited for the congresswoman to finish completely. Waited for the echo of that fake smile to fade. Then she leaned forward. Just an inch. Mr. Chairman. Her voice was quiet, even, almost unnervingly calm. Is this what we're doing today? The chairman cleared his throat. Congresswoman, let's try to stick to the amendment being discussed. The congresswoman scoffed, leaning back. Fine, if she doesn't want to answer reasonable questions. She let the implication hang there. Reasonable. Crockett tilted her head slightly. A small, almost imperceptible movement. There was nothing reasonable about that detour. And everyone knew it. It was a jab. A distraction. An attempt to fluster. She didn't take the bait. Instead, she addressed the chairman. Mr. Chairman, I request that the congresswoman's remarks regarding my personal business be struck from the record. They are not pertinent to the proceedings. Her tone was purely procedural. But the subtext was clear. Stay on topic, stop playing games. The chairman nodded quickly, relieved. So ordered, Congresswoman, please confine your remarks. But the congresswoman was already talking over him. Oh, I'm sure she'd like them struck. Can't have transparency, can we? Another murmur from the gallery, louder this time. Some nervous laughter from the congresswoman's side of the aisle. Crockett didn't look at the gallery. Didn't look at the laughing members. Her gaze remained locked on the congresswoman. That steady, unwavering focus. It was starting to feel less like calmness. More like pressure. A silent weight pressing down. The congresswoman seemed to feel it. She shifted in her seat. Adjusted her microphone again, unnecessarily. Her smile tightened. Crockett just waited. The silence stretched. Maybe 5 seconds. Felt like a minute. The procedural request was granted. The irrelevant remarks struck. Logically, Crockett should now address the actual amendment. Return to the business at hand. That's what usually happened. A brief skirmish, smoothed over by procedure. But the air was different now. The personal jab, the attempt to derail, it lingered. Crockett didn't pick up her notes. Didn't look down. She held the congresswoman's gaze. And the room held its breath. Waiting. Part 2. The congresswoman decided to fill the silence. A mistake. She tried to regain control with volume. Look, if we're talking about fiscal responsibility. Crockett raised a hand. Not sharply. Just firmly. A quiet assertion of space. Of time. Mr. Chairman, I believe I still have the floor. Her voice hadn't risen an octave. Still calm, still measured. But the edge was there now. A thin, sharp line. The chairman nodded again, looking flustered. The gentle lady from Texas is correct. You have the floor. He avoided looking at the other congresswoman. The power dynamic was visibly shifting. Subtly but undeniably. The congresswoman huffed, crossing her arms. A picture of petulance. Crockett ignored her. She turned slightly, addressing the chair, but her words were clearly aimed elsewhere. We were discussing the impact of this legislation on minority communities, specifically the potential for discriminatory outcomes in housing grants. She laid out the facts. Clear, concise, undeniable. No emotion yet, just data, just impact. The Congresswoman started shaking her head before Crockett even finished the sentence. Exaggerated disbelief. Rolling her eyes for her colleagues. This is ridiculous. We're bending over backwards. Crockett stopped talking. Mid-sentence. She didn't snap back, didn't demand order. She just stopped and turned her head slowly back towards the Congresswoman. That look again. Patient, piercing. The Congresswoman's voice trailed off. The performative eye-rolling ceased. She was caught mid-interruption. And Crockett just waited. The silence this time was heavy. Awkward. You could feel people shifting uncomfortably in their seats. The focus wasn't on the legislation anymore. It was on this stare-down. This silent battle of wills. The chairman cleared his throat nervously. Congresswoman Crockett, please continue. Crockett didn't break eye contact with her interrupter for another second. Then a slow blink. She turned back to the chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I was saying, she picked up exactly where she left off. Same calm tone, same measured pace. But everyone in the room felt it. The interruption hadn't just failed. It had backfired. It made the interrupter look childish. It made Crockett look immovable. The Congresswoman tried to interject again, a few minutes later. Something about wasteful spending. This time, Crockett didn't even pause her sentence. She just kept talking, looking straight ahead, as if the interruption was nothing more than static. A meaningless buzz. The Congresswoman's words died in the air. Ignored, overridden. Her face flushed slightly, a crack in the confident facade. She started fiddling with a pen, tapping it. The confident posture was gone, replaced by restless energy. The audience noticed. The murmurs were quieter now. More focused. People leaning forward, sensing the shift. This wasn't just debate. It was a masterclass in handling disruption. Without raising her voice. Without losing her cool. Just by using focus, silence, and timing. She was using the other woman's energy against her. Letting the interruptions expose the bias. Letting the disrespect speak for itself. Crockett finished her point about the housing grants. Laid out the data, the potential harm, the need for safeguards. And then she paused. Deliberately. Surveyed the committee members. Her gaze lingered for an extra beat on the Congresswoman, who pointedly looked down at her notes, avoiding eye contact now. The transfer of power was almost complete. Not through aggression. Through composure. Part 3. The debate moved on technically. Other members spoke. Arguments were made for and against the amendment. But the energy in the room remained centered on that earlier exchange. The failed interruptions. The quiet dominance Crockett had established. The Congresswoman who had tried to derail her remained subdued. She spoke again later on a different point. But her voice lacked its earlier confidence. It was flatter, more forced. She kept her remarks brief, stuck to the script. No more ad hominem attacks, no more performative outrage. It was as if the air had gone out of her balloon. Crockett listened politely. Her face gave nothing away. But you could see the other members watching the dynamic. Stealing glances between the two women. They understood what had happened. The unspoken rules of engagement had been tested. And the challenger had been rebuffed. Quietly, efficiently, devastatingly. Someone on Crockett's side of the aisle asked her a follow-up question, expanding on her point about discriminatory impact. She answered thoughtfully, bringing in historical context, mentioning redlining, mentioning how seemingly neutral policies can perpetuate inequality. Her voice remained calm, but the passion was audible now. Grounded in facts, in history, in lived experience. She spoke of her district, of families struggling to find affordable housing, of the quiet, grinding fear of displacement. It wasn't just abstract policy. It was people's lives. And as she spoke, you could feel the room listening differently. Not just as politicians scoring points, but as human beings hearing a genuine concern. Even some members on the other side seemed to be paying closer attention. Leaning in slightly, frowning in thought, not disagreement. Then the first congresswoman couldn't help herself. Maybe the shift in atmosphere bothered her. Maybe she felt her earlier dominance slipping away completely. She requested time for a rebuttal. The chairman granted it. She started off reasonably enough, talking about market forces, individual responsibility, the usual counter-arguments. But then the mask slipped again. She looked directly at Crockett. Perhaps the gentle lady doesn't understand how economics works. Maybe she needs a refresher. It was condescending, patronizing, designed to belittle, to provoke. A collective intake of breath from the gallery. A low groan from somewhere on the committee dais. This was it. The moment the earlier tension had been building towards. Everyone looked at Crockett. How would she respond to this? Would she finally lose her cool? Would she fire back with anger? That's what the instigator clearly wanted. Expected. Crockett didn't move for a beat. Her expression didn't change. She let the comment hang in the air. Let the ugliness of it settle over the room. Let the audience absorb the sheer disrespect. Then she tilted her head again. That same small, deliberate movement. She looked not at the congresswoman, but at the chairman. Mr. Chairman. Her voice was dangerously quiet now. A stillness before the storm. Point of order. The chairman looked startled. State your point of order, Congresswoman Crockett. Crockett paused, took another slow breath, and delivered the line that would echo far beyond that room. Please clarify. Are personal insults now acceptable discourse in this committee? Or just for some members? Part 4. Silence. Absolute stunned silence. You could hear the air conditioning hum. Someone coughed nervously in the back. The chairman stared, momentarily speechless. The congresswoman who made the insult looked like she'd been slapped. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. No witty comeback, no procedural shield. Crockett's question cut through all of that. It wasn't angry, it wasn't loud. It was surgical. It laid bare the hypocrisy, the double standard. The implication was devastating. Is this how it works? You get to insult me and I'm supposed to take it. Because of who I am, because of who you are. The chairman finally found his voice, fumbling slightly. No, Congresswoman, personal insults are not acceptable. From any member. Let's maintain decorum. He sounded rattled. He knew this was escalating beyond his control. Crockett kept her eyes on him. Waiting. Not satisfied yet. Then, Mr. Chairman, I request that the Congresswoman's personal attack be struck from the record. And I expect an apology. Not to me, but to this committee. To the dignity of this House. Another ripple through the audience. An apology, not demanded out of personal pique, but for the sake of the institution. Brilliant. It framed the insult not as an attack on her, but as an attack on the process. On the legitimacy of their work. The accused congresswoman sputtered. I was merely suggesting. Crockett cut her off, turning her gaze directly to her now. No. One word. Delivered with quiet finality. You suggested I was ignorant. You implied I didn't belong here. That is not suggestion, that is insult. Her voice was still low, still controlled. But the fire was visible now. In her eyes, in the unwavering line of her jaw. The congresswoman recoiled slightly. Visibly flustered. She looked to the chairman for help. He looked deeply uncomfortable. Congresswoman, perhaps you could rephrase your point. Rephrase? That was weak, and everyone knew it. Crockett just held the Congresswoman's gaze. The silence stretched again. Thicker this time, more charged. The Congresswoman looked down, then up, then away. Anywhere but at Crockett. Finally mumbling, almost inaudibly. I apologize if my words were misinterpreted. A non-apology, weak, evasive. Crockett didn't accept it. Didn't reject it. She simply absorbed it. And then turned back to the chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. May I continue with my remarks on the amendment? As if nothing had happened. As if she hadn't just dismantled her opponent with devastating precision. The whiplash was incredible. From high-tension confrontation back to policy discussion in a heartbeat. The chairman nodded, looking immensely relieved. Please proceed, Congresswoman. Crockett picked up her notes, found her place, and continued discussing housing grants. But the room was irrevocably changed. The audience was rapt, silent. No more murmurs, just focused attention. The other committee members looked stunned. Some impressed, some perhaps intimidated. The Congresswoman who had made the insult sat stiffly. Her face tight with resentment, humiliation. She had tried to play dirty, tried to use personal attacks to undermine substance. And Crockett had turned it back on her. Using the rules, using composure, using the truth. She hadn't just defended herself. She had exposed the tactic. And in doing so, won a profound moral victory. The amendment itself almost seemed secondary now. The real event was this. This quiet, powerful assertion of dignity. This refusal to be diminished. Part 5. The rest of the committee hearing felt like an anticlimax. People went through the motions. Votes were cast. Procedural points were made. But the energy had dissipated. Or rather, it had coalesced around that single moment. The quiet demand for respect. The surgical strike against the personal insult. When the hearing finally adjourned, there was an awkwardness in the air. Members gathered their papers, avoiding eye contact. Especially with the Congresswoman who had been put in her place. She left quickly, head down, shoulders hunched slightly. A stark contrast to her confident entrance. Crockett, however, took her time. She spoke briefly with a colleague. Shared a quiet word with her staffer. Her demeanor was unchanged. Calm, composed, professional. No sign of triumph. No gloating. Just steady. As she walked out, a few people in the gallery caught her eye. Nodded respectfully. A quiet acknowledgement of what they had witnessed. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod back. And then she was gone. But the moment wasn't over. Not by a long shot. It was just beginning. Someone had been recording. Of course they had. C-SPAN cameras caught everything. But it was the phone clip that went first. Likely from someone in the gallery. Focused tight on Crockett's face. Her quiet delivery. Please clarify. The pause. Our personal insults, now acceptable discourse in this committee. Pause again, longer this time. Or just for some members. Uploaded within minutes of the hearing ending. No context needed. The raw power of the moment spoke for itself. It hit Twitter first. Then TikTok, Instagram Reels. The algorithm gods smiled. Or maybe they just recognized dynamite when they saw it. Initial posts were just the clip. Maybe a caption like, wow. Or Jasmine Crockett wasn't having it. Then came the commentary. The look she gives her. The power of staying calm. This is how you handle bullies. The views started climbing. Thousands. Tens of thousands. Hundreds of thousands. Within an hour, it was hitting escape velocity. People started identifying the other Congresswoman. Her history, her previous statements. The context made Crockett's response even more powerful. It wasn't just a random spat. It was pushback against a pattern. Hashtags started trending. Jasmine Crockett. Decorum. Quiet power. Point of order. The clip was sliced and diced. Sound bites isolated. Reaction videos popped up. People filming themselves watching the clip. Gasped applause, slow claps. Yes, Queen. She ate. The restraint is incredible. News outlets started picking it up. Online articles first. Watch, Rep. Crockett silences colleague after personal attack. Heated exchange erupts in House committee. Crockett's point of order goes viral. The narrative was forming. Calm, collected black woman shuts down aggressive colleague. Poise under pressure. Grace and fire. It resonated deeply. With women who'd been patronized. With people of color who'd faced microaggressions. With anyone who'd ever wished they had the perfect comeback in a high-stakes moment. She hadn't shouted, hadn't cursed. She had simply refused to accept disrespect. And demanded the rules apply equally. It was a master stroke. And it was only just beginning to ripple outward. Part 6. The initial online buzz quickly solidified into something bigger. Cable news channels started playing the clip. Chopped down, of course, often missing the crucial build-up. But the core moment was undeniable. Pundits weighed in. Predictably divided. On one side, a powerful moment of standing up to unprofessional conduct. Crockett showed remarkable composure and strength. A lesson in how to handle workplace bullies. On the other side, taken out of context, a minor procedural disagreement blown out of proportion. Just political theater. Was Crockett being overly sensitive? That last one sparked its own backlash. Overly sensitive, for demanding not to be insulted. Tell me you don't understand bias without telling me. The other Congresswoman's office released a statement. Predictably defensive. My comments were focused on policy differences. I regret if my tone was misconstrued. This is being sensationalized for political gain. Again, the non-apology, the deflection. It just added fuel to the fire. People screenshotted the statement alongside the clip. The contrast was stark. The defensiveness versus Crockett's clear, direct words. Think pieces started appearing. Op-eds analyzing the racial and gender dynamics. The specific burden on black women in positions of power. The expectation to remain calm, even when provoked. The tightrope walk between being assertive and being labeled angry. Crockett's handling of the situation was lauded as navigating that tightrope perfectly. She hadn't raised her voice, which might have played into stereotypes. Instead, she used the rules, the language of the institution itself, to expose the bias. It was institutional jujitsu. Someone dug up Crockett's background. Her time as a public defender. Her reputation as a sharp legal mind. Suddenly, the composure made even more sense. This wasn't her first rodeo dealing with difficult people in positions of authority. A brief flashback, perhaps, to a courtroom scene years ago. A young Jasmine Crockett facing down a dismissive judge. Learning early the power of preparation, the strength in restraint. Understanding that the loudest person isn't always the strongest. That sometimes silence speaks volumes. That focus can be a weapon. This context added another layer to the viral moment. It wasn't just luck, it wasn't just a good line. It was experience, training, character. Meanwhile, Crockett herself remained relatively quiet. She didn't immediately go on a media tour. Didn't issue fiery statements. She retweeted a couple of news articles. Posted a simple message thanking people for their support. And then, she went back to talking about policy. About the issues affecting her district. About the work she was there to do. This, too, was noted. She's not letting this distract her. Class act. Focused on the job. Her restraint after the event was almost as powerful as her restraint during it. It reinforced the narrative. She wasn't seeking the spotlight. The spotlight found her because she refused to shrink. The other congresswoman, however, seemed unable to let it go. She gave an interview doubling down, complaining about being silenced, accusing Crockett of playing the victim. It backfired again. She came across as petty, obsessed, unable to admit fault. Each time she spoke, the clip got shared again. Each time Crockett looked stronger, calmer, more dignified. The contrast was becoming a chasm. Part 7. The ripple effect continued to spread. Late-night talk show hosts played the clip. Did their monologue jokes. Some found humor in the awkwardness, the sheer audacity of the initial insult. Others focused on Crockett's comeback, the mic drop quality of her point of order. Sketches parodied the exchange, exaggerating the characters. The calm hero, the sputtering antagonist. It became a cultural shorthand, a reference point for standing up to nonsense. Podcasters dedicated segments to it. Political analysts dissected the C-SPAN footage frame by frame. The initial smirk on the antagonist's face. The slow turn of Crockett's head. The shifting reactions of the other committee members. The way the energy drained from the antagonist after the rebuke. It was a mini-drama playing out in forensic detail. People started using the audio on TikTok, lip-syncing to Crockett's lines in their own videos, acting out scenarios of workplace conflict, customer service nightmares, family arguments. Please clarify, are personal insults now acceptable or just for some members? Became a meme. A way to call out hypocrisy in everyday life. The reach extended beyond political junkies. It tapped into a universal feeling. The frustration of being unfairly targeted. The desire for dignity and respect. The power of finding the right words at the right time. Universities discussed it in communications classes. Leadership seminars used it as a case study in conflict resolution. How to maintain control under pressure. How to de-escalate while still holding your ground. How to use procedure strategically. Then came the merchandise. Unofficial, of course, popping up on Etsy and Redbubble. T-shirts with point of order. Mugs with please clarify. Stickers with Crockett's composed silhouette. It was becoming iconic. A symbol of something more than just a committee hearing squabble. It represented pushback, resilience, quiet strength. Crockett's office likely saw none of this coming. They probably expected some local news coverage, maybe a mention on a political blog. Not this. Not a global viral moment. Not becoming a meme, a t-shirt, a symbol. But it tapped into something raw, something real. The exhaustion with performative politics, the hunger for authenticity. The admiration for someone who could cut through the noise with quiet clarity. The antagonist, meanwhile, became a cautionary tale. Her name became associated with pettiness, with bias, with the kind of political behavior people were tired of. Her attempts to control the narrative failed spectacularly. Every denial, every deflection, just made Crockett's quiet dignity shine brighter. The contrast was the story, and the story was irresistible. Part 8. The wave eventually crested, as all viral moments do. The clip stopped dominating every news cycle. The hashtags became less frequent. But the impact lingered. Something had shifted. Inside the Beltway, colleagues looked at Crockett differently. With a newfound respect, maybe a touch of apprehension. She had shown she wouldn't be intimidated. Wouldn't be easily dismissed. She had established a boundary, clearly, publicly. The antagonist colleagues seemed diminished. Less vocal in committees, more cautious. The failed attack had cost her credibility, influence. Her charisma, once a shield, now seemed brittle, fake. The power dynamics within the institution had subtly recalibrated. Outside Washington, the resonance continued. People didn't forget the feeling the clip gave them. The surge of yes when she delivered that line. The satisfaction of seeing composure triumph over condescension. It became part of Crockett's political identity. Not just a policy wonk or a party line voter, but someone with steel in her spine, someone who represented standing firm. Her fundraising saw a significant bump. Small dollar donations poured in from across the country. People sending $5, $10, $20, often with notes attached. Thank you for speaking up. You represent us. Keep fighting. It wasn't just about that one moment anymore. It was about what that moment signified. It tapped into a broader cultural conversation about respect, power, and identity. About who gets to speak, who gets interrupted, and who is expected to stay silent. Crockett handled the aftermath with continued grace. She acknowledged the support but pivoted back to the work, using the increased platform not to relitigate the hearing incident, but to talk about issues. Voting rights, economic justice, criminal justice reform. She demonstrated that the viral moment wasn't the destination. It was fuel. Fuel to keep pushing for the things she believed in. There was a second brief flashback moment seated here. Not a courtroom this time. Maybe her grandmother, years ago. Giving her advice. Don't let them see you sweat, child. Hold your head high, speak your truth, quiet or loud. Respect yourself first and others will follow, eventually. That quiet strength wasn't accidental. It was learned, inherited, cultivated. The online discourse, while fatting from the trending topics, continued in deeper ways. Academic papers were probably already being drafted, analyzing the communication strategies, the political implications, the cultural impact. It had become a reference point, a case study, a moment that wouldn't easily be forgotten. Because it wasn't just about politics. It was about human dignity, and the quiet power of demanding it. Part 9. Months passed. The news cycle moved on to other outrages, other dramas. But the point of order, moment had settled into the collective memory. It would resurface occasionally, mentioned in articles about powerful women, cited in discussions about civility in politics, used as an example of effective communication under pressure. Crockett continued her work in Congress, drafting legislation, speaking on the floor, attending committee hearings. She remained focused, driven, but there was a subtle difference in how she was perceived, how she was treated. Fewer interruptions, more careful engagement, even from opponents. That moment of quiet defiance had earned her a different kind of space. The antagonist congresswoman. Her trajectory seemed altered. She was still there, still vocal. But the sheen was gone. The viral smackdown had exposed something brittle beneath the bluster. She became a less effective messenger for her side, haunted by the ghost of that C-SPAN clip. The lasting impact wasn't just about individual reputations. It sparked conversations within political institutions, about decorum, about rules of engagement, about the weaponization of procedure and personal attacks. Did it fundamentally change behavior overnight? No, politics is still politics, but it provided a powerful counter-narrative, a demonstration that there was another way to operate. That composure could be more powerful than volume. That truth delivered calmly could cut deeper than insult. The online world, too, held onto the moment. The memification continued, albeit at a lower frequency. It became part of the digital lexicon for calling out unfairness. Feeling very please clarify today. Channeling my inner Jasmine Crockett. It transcended the specific political context. Became a symbol of everyday resistance against disrespect. You saw it reflected in subtle ways. More people sharing stories of their own point-of-order moments. In meetings, in family gatherings, in online arguments. Inspired perhaps by Crockett's example. Finding their own voice to push back calmly but firmly. The ripple effect wasn't just about clicks and views. It was about empowerment. About modeling a different kind of strength. A strength rooted in self-respect and clarity. Not in aggression or volume. Crockett never seemed to lean into the viral star persona. She didn't try to replicate the moment, didn't build her brand around confrontation. She simply continued to be herself, prepared, perceptive, resolute. And perhaps that was the most powerful message of all. The authenticity of her reaction was why it resonated. It wasn't performance, it was principle. And that's much harder to dismiss, much harder to forget. Part 10. Years from now, when people look back at the political discourse of this era, that C-SPAN clip will likely endure. A small moment in a long hearing, magnified by the internet, solidified into a symbol. It won't be remembered for the specific amendment being discussed, or even the details of the initial provocation. It will be remembered for the shift in power, the quiet assertion of dignity, the way Jasmine Crockett held her ground, not by matching the aggression directed at her, but by transcending it. Please clarify. The question hangs in the air, long after the hearing room cleared. Are personal insults now acceptable discourse, or just for some members? It's a question that echoes beyond the walls of Congress, into workplaces, online forums, dinner table conversations. It challenges hypocrisy, demands fairness, requires introspection. The antagonist became a footnote to Crockett's moment, a catalyst for a display of strength she likely never intended to provoke. Her attempt to diminish ended up elevating her target. A classic case of political blowback. The story isn't about Crockett winning in a conventional sense. There was no trophy, no victory lap. The victory was in the resonance, in the way countless people saw themselves in her situation, felt validated by her response, felt empowered to demand similar respect in their own lives. The final scene isn't Crockett celebrating. It's her, perhaps weeks later, working late in her office, poring over legislative text, briefing papers stacked high. The viral fame hasn't changed the core work. The commitment. Maybe she sees a notification on her phone. Another article mentioning the incident, another supportive message. She might allow herself a small, weary smile, an acknowledgement of the strange journey that moment took. But then she puts the phone down, turns back to the papers, back to the job. The quiet confidence isn't just for the cameras. It's who she is. The hearing room falls silent in memory. The echoes of the confrontation fade. What remains is the quiet strength, the surgical precision of truth, the uncomfortable respect she commanded, even from those who disagreed with her. The ripple effect continues, not as a trending topic, but as a subtle shift in awareness. A reminder that power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it speaks quietly, asks a simple question, and waits patiently for an answer. The screen fades not on applause, but on that quiet focus. The work continues. The dignity endures. No further commentary needed. The moment speaks for itself. Forever archived. Instantly viral. Quietly powerful.